Hello and welcome to the Coaching Crowd podcast with me, Jo Wheatley, and my friend and co-host Zoe Hawkins.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to another week of us podcasting. And this week we're talking about over-identifying as a coach. This has come up in supervision for both Jo and I this week with learners from our programs. And over-identifying with a coach is where you're taking coaching in all areas of your life and it's becoming almost like your whole identity. So we just wanted to talk a little bit around what it is and what you could do to, I suppose, create some boundaries so that you're not always on as a coach.
Yeah, I think just before we dive into that, um, I think I just want to speak to people that are sometimes put off from training as a coach. And I know the language you and I use, I think sometimes can be a little bit of a blocker because we talk about training as a coach or training to be a coach, like to be the thing itself, rather than training in coaching skills. And I think the identity there, some people will think, well, I don't want to be a coach. I'd like to develop the skills and I'd like to develop those skills to help me in my role, whatever the role is, or in my life in general, or for my own mental health and well-being, but I don't want to be a coach. So I think it's just important to say that. And maybe the conversation that we're having today might also be relevant in different ways to that too.
I think it's an important point because, when we look at our emotions coaching, we talk about how you embody an emotion like I am sad as opposed to I am feeling sad. And I think the way that you and I talk about coaches, we have literally fully embodied that identity. And I think in full transparency that that's not always healthy for you and I in our own lives. And sort of an example of that would be, if I'm experiencing some conflict in my life, sometimes I forget I have the right to just be angry and critical and judgmental and moody. But when I think about if a coach was to respond to those situations, I'd respond in a more adult way, in a much more measured way, and I'd be reflective about it. And in reality, you have to be able to be a fallible human. And I think sometimes that identity as a coach, when I notice I'm over identifying as a coach, it's where I'm in that role as opposed to just being my fallible human self.
Yeah, the difference between saying I am a coach versus I am trained as a coach or I work as a coach or my job is to coach people X, X, Y, and Z, creating that little bit of a distance. And I think what you're talking to there as well is the judgment that we place on ourselves when we sort of when we over identify, as in we are that thing all the time. And so as much as I don't experience, I suppose it's that little bit of I don't feel like I particularly put a hat on when I am coaching clients, but to some extent I do, I suppose, in reality, because I am stepping into a different role and I don't hold all of my conversations, in the way that I hold it with my coachees. Um, and I have taken to supervision, and I can't remember if it's my supervisor. I think my supervisor reflected it to me once. This is quite a long time ago, but it always stuck with me. Are you over identifying as a coach, Jo? And it was almost like the question gave me permission to not be almost obsessed. I don't know, I wasn't obsessed, but I think I was probably saying things along the lines of, I know as a coach I should. Those kind of sentence stems. So I say, what are the indicators? If you're listening and wondering, do I over identify as a coach? I would say, and that might be an example. So can you think of other things that people say or, that might be an indicator of that?
I think when I think about the things that I've just sort of briefly talked about there, I know I shouldn't be angry, but, or I should be dealing with this in a much more measured way, or, just not even. I think me and you may have had conversations sometimes, and you might say to me, like, I can't believe you're not more like upset about that, where sometimes I'll measure my responses because I've got a coach hat on rather than my everyday sort of human hat. And like you said, I can't really separate the two, but I think I don't necessarily give myself permission, or if I'm over identifying as a coach, to just let the experience unfold through me, as opposed to almost like getting a firm grip on something before I allow my responses to come. I think that's how I notice it manifesting in myself. And obviously different, depending on what's going on in life, different responses will come at different times. But sometimes I do catch myself and I'm like, I just need to let go a little bit here, for sure. Yeah.
And I think the risk of over identifying with all it is, and the meaning that you as an individual make as to what a coach is. And of course, my version of a coach is going to be different to other people's version, but the risk ultimately is burnout. Holding yourself to that, what is a very high, threshold really, or tolerance level, and openness and to the world, and all of those things. The real risk is burnout. And that if you expect yourself, I think this is a risk actually of over identifying, is you expect yourself to be able to deal with everything yourself because you have the skills of a coach. So therefore, you can coach yourself all of the time, and you wouldn't need to reach out because you've developed all of those skills. That's a possibility there too.
I think it's also the flip side, which is you can coach people all of the time.
Mm.
So because you have the skills of deep listening and you have the skills of building a rapport and creating safe spaces, there's an energy that comes alongside that. So if you're at parties or out with friends, you end up going into that energy of being a coach. And what you know of coaching when you're working with people is it's a high focus that you put into your session. So if you're putting that same high level of focus into your friendship conversations and into your partner, into your loved ones, and and you're doing that in every relationship in your life, you've got no boundaries left. So you've got people who are drawing on those wonderful skills that you have, and you probably doing so willingly, but you end up feeling depleted and exhausted. And so I think sometimes it's worth remembering, like if you're down, I don't know, down in the cafe with your friend having a cup of coffee and your friend is talking about their awful job, yes, you could slip into deep listening and you could do that. Sometimes your friend doesn't need you to do that. Your friend needs you to go, that sounds awful. Yeah. That sounds like an absolute nightmare. Or that person, yeah, can't believe they've done that. They just want you to collude, and coaching, obviously, you learn to not do those things, but don't forget that sometimes your relationship needs you to just be that person who you were before you had all these skills. You don't have to be a coach all of the time.
Yeah. Who else are you? I think is a question that comes to mind. Like, what are all the other strands that make up who you are, and whatever your starting point for that is, whether your name is your starting point for your identity, or your place of birth is the starting point for your identity, or your heritage, whatever it is, what are all the wonderful strands that make up your identity? And are there any parts of you that aren't getting as much attention as perhaps they would like to have? If you over identify as a coach, it might be that you're blocking out the other things that can bring you joy, or want to be nurtured.
Mm. I think it's also worth recognizing that when you train to be a coach or you train in coaching skills, it does change you. It does change the way you see the world. It changes your perspectives on the relationships that you have. It opens up new awareness that you didn't once have. And you can't, I suppose I say I can't unsee what I have come to see. And it's balancing that, isn't it? Between, yes, okay, I have evolved, I have grown as a person and I now see the world in this way. And all the other people in your life haven't had the same experience. And so where you over identify as a coach, it's acknowledging where you have grown and yet others haven't. And so how do you now need to be in those relationships to be able to continue to thrive? That can be a source of tension, but it can also be a source of growth for the relationship, whatever that relationship may be.
Mm. Yeah, because your expectations of others are based on your expectations of yourself, or what you now see to be obvious. and basic, actually for lots of people it aren't, because they haven't kind of been able to, have the opportunity to delve into these things and spend a bit more time understanding, both the complexity and simplicity of what it is to coach other people. And there are the realities of everyday life, that there's the forces that come across people. And you and I have talked so many times around, how it's a blessing and a curse in some ways, because um have it, with our children and the experiences that they have in life, and the impact that we know that these things can have, and what our role and responsibility is then in relation to that, and that can be a challenge. So supervision is a great place to be able to explore your relationship to your coach identity, what that means to you, what it is for you. How do you honor that, do that, present it, communicate it? How do you resource yourself away from it? That is a function of supervision.
Helps you to bring the lightness to the work.
Mm.
So I think when you over identify as a coach, you've talked about risk of burnout, but I think it can get heavy, I suppose, because you're in this, I say serious energy. When I reflect on some of my coaching sessions, some of them can be really joyful and light. But I think, as I said before, it's the energy, the focus, the attention that you bring. It's serious. You take the role as a coach seriously. It's a responsibility to serve your clients really well. And I think if you don't slip out of that energy, you can be almost like leaking that same level of service to your children, your partner, your friends. So, being able to step out of the role and into your child, for example, into playfulness, which you don't do in a coaching session. You stay in your adult and you stay in the here and now. But when you get to be silly and joyful and laugh and joke and play and banter, that brings lightness. And that is stepping out of the role of a coach, which you're not going to do in a session, but you're going to do that in your life, like to remember that to be human, to have that experience is to have all of those parts of you. I was going to say in equal quantity, not necessarily, but all of those parts, if you get airtime, the serious, the light, the joyful. And so if you find, that you're in that sort of more serious space, check in. Can I bring my child out to play?
Well, it's
What's
it's
needed here?
interesting though, because there is room for play in coaching. And I know you know that, but I'm just checking for those that are listening. Yes, there is room for play. I think what you were saying though is that you are staying in that, you are still in the professional role as coach and client, and the type of play that you're talking about outside of that is, has different qualities about it to the way that we might bring play and lightness into our coaching conversations. Um, over identifying as a coach is interesting if you think about it in the context of an internal coach. And an internal coach may purely work as a coach in an organization, or they may be somebody that holds another role in the organization and also forms part of a coaching cohort. Or they are a manager or leader that has trained in coaching skills, and they tend to use a coaching approach in in their role. Now, they might only use those skills more in their one-to-ones with their team members, but they may not be using their coaching skills so much in meetings with their peers, or they might be using those skills but just not in a conventional coaching number of sessions relationship. And how will they be received by others? Because sometimes other people might feel that you are over identifying as a coach, and they might even request that you step out of the coach mode or take the coach hat off and show up, with a different um, part of you.
Hmm. Where I was drawn to reflect when we talk about over identifying with a coach is almost like under identifying as a coach, and I was kind of reflecting on like how you live your life. Is that in or out of alignment with the role and identity that you have as a coach? So if I was looking for a coach, for example, I would be looking for somebody who wants to live their best life, sets goals, is investing in their personal development, is interested in the hidden obstacles that are in their way of success, and they're doing something about it. and where they have relationships in their life that aren't working, they're taking a growth mindset to those to do something about it. You know, that kind of essence. And so I was reflecting on, is there something around where you don't take the role of the coach as seriously as, I don't know, maybe needed? I think there's judgment in that, but I'm not sure if you hear what I'm saying. Like, you know, there's this piece around how I am in my life is in alignment with my role as a coach. And I think I would find it hard to show up as a coach if I wasn't applying what I know about the coaching mindset in my life. That's a personal thing, but I'm just, yeah, playing that out.
So I think what I'm hearing from you is more when somebody is literally putting the hat on,
Hmm.
but there isn't congruence in terms of like the coaching mindset elsewhere in their life. So it's like something they do purely rather than we might think of it as like a way of being. Like it is an approach that we take as a result of the trainings and, you know, our beliefs and our values are aligned to coaching. So um I think what there's a balance to be had. What we're saying really is that there is a risk that you begin over time to over identify as a coach. And we encourage you to think about what would be what would be the signs that that might be the case, what might be the consequences of that, and have you thought about this before? And if not, as you start to think about it, what's the importance of it for you? And maybe it's a topic, you know, for you to take to your own coaching supervision.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if you're listening to this and you're inspired to delve into your own identity as a coach or to develop some coaching skills, then come and check out our coaching courses and our CPD programs over on our website at igcompany.co.uk.